Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfree, and I am your host. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for interacting with the product in any way that you can. Like, comment, subscribe if that's all applicable. Star ratings, written reviews, anything that you can do to help out the show, it all matters. If you've done all that, share. Share the episode, share the show in general. Anyone that you know that you think might enjoy it, let them know we're here. Please point them in our direction. It means a lot. It absolutely means a lot to me that you guys continue to do this. So thank you for listening, as always. On the agenda this evening, last night, UFC on ESPN 37. Uh, wow. You know, I have to appreciate Jack Slack's facetious tweet on the matter. Sometimes it's the events that actually look good on paper that deliver. Because of that stupid UFC talking point that, it's these fight nights that everyone sleeps on that give you the best action. And it's not. It's really not. But, I talked about it in the preview. I had a lot of high hopes for this event, and we got violence. We got a lot of violence. So we have a lot to go over as far as that goes. Really good card, actually. And a preview. This coming Saturday, the UFC is back at the Apex facility. They will have UFC on ESPN 38, so we will preview that. And news around the combat sports world and whatnot, so, we will have all of that to get to. All right, let's not waste too much time. Let's get right into things now. UFC on ESPN 37, main event. Josh Emmett defeats, before I get into this fight, just very briefly, we were supposed to get Joe Lauzon and Donald Cerrone on this card. They were supposed to fight a few weeks ago. Cerrone got food poisoning. They pushed it back here. This time, Lauzon tweaked his left knee. Like the day of the... He made weight and then did something to it. To hear him tell it, he was just like bent over putting his socks on, and then when he got done with that, his knee would not bend. He spent the rest of that day not being able to put any weight on his leg, so that fight got called off. I don't know what injury he might have, but hopefully it's not serious. Your knee locks up when you're just doing normal everyday things. That's not good. I don't think you have to be a medical professional to know that's not good, but how bad, what you might do what you do to deal with it, I don't know. So hopefully it's not serious. But this might be one of those cursed fights that never actually comes to fruition, and I'm not that high on old guy fights at the moment, so I'm okay if that one never actually comes to pass. Just throwing that out there. So we lost that, but we had 13 fights on the card with that one, so 12 without it. Yeah. So, again, hopefully Lauzon is able to assess and address whatever the injury is in quick succession. So, because I don't have anything bad to say about Joe Lauzon. I hope he's able to have a good quality of life as he moves on with his existence beyond fighting. All right, with that out of the way, main event. Josh Emmett defeats Calvin Kattar via split decision. These were 48-47s. One of these cards I thought was total crap. Total crap? Yeah, there was one of them that gave Emmett the fourth. Doing this live, I was 4-1 for Kattar. I gave Emmett the third, which I think was unanimously his. No issues with that round. But I gave Kattar the other rounds. Now, 1 and 2, I'm not as sold on doing it live. I think 1 in particular was very close. 1 could have gone either way. I favored Kattar's work, but I'm not going to get bent out of shape over that one. 2, again, I favored Kattar, but I don't dislike a 3-2 score for Josh Emmett. I don't agree with it, but I think it's defensible. Again, there was one of the judges gave Emmett the first 3 and then Kattar 4 and 5. I think that's defensible. One judge gave... Pull up the specifics here because I want to make sure I get this right. Have a quick look here. Yeah, so it was Chris Lee who gave Emmett rounds 1, 3, and 4. Giving Emmett the fourth is a lot. That's no. No. Like that's straight up wrong. By every logical explanation of the judging criteria, there's no reason that round should have gone to Emmett. None. Now, again, if you gave the fight to Emmett, I I disagree, but like I said, I'm not throwing a fit, and I'm not upset. I just don't agree. But that's not the end of the world. Looks like most of the media gave it to Cater. Yeah, most. Not all, but most. There's no need to go through each individual outlet. Just as in most of them thought Cater won that 48-47. Uh, I think Emmett got a lot of credit for power shots and for aggression that didn't amount to a whole lot. Now, this did take place in Texas, and to the best of my recollection, Texas uses the old rule set and the old scoring criteria. The UFC has abandoned informing us on the broadcast, mind you, about what rule set they're operating under. I don't know why, but they have. They've just let people try to figure it out. I guess I don't know. It annoys me, uh, but there it is as far as that goes. So under the old criteria, and that might be a thing here. I'd have to double check this, but that's to the best of my recollection. Under the older scoring criteria that Texas uses, they give a bit more weight to aggression and forward pressure, whether or not it leads to anything effective. This is part of the argument about John Jones when he beat Dominic Reyes. That Jones got a lot of credit for for forward motion and forward pressure, even though he didn't do much with it, and that was permissible under the scoring system that they were scoring criteria that was being used. I tend to think that even under that criteria, I got a hard time finding the first three for Emmett. I think that second one in particular really probably should have gone to Cater. But it's like I said, it's not the end of the world. Dude, Emmett's face was busted up by the end of this. Cater, I think what cost. So you had Emmett who was swinging power punches, and especially under the old criteria, power punches, even if you block them and whatnot, they tend to look better. They tend to stick out more in the minds of judges and whatnot. So, bit of there's gamesmanship that has to kind of go into that. But Cater's jab was just, he chewed up Emmett for long stretches of this fight. Emmett's, his left eye was a mess by the end of this. He got cut around the outside of his eyebrow above it, but the outer corner, I think it was the first round. And it wasn't bad when it first happened. It was small, it bled, but it wasn't too bad. Cater was able to zero in on that thing, and by the end of this fight, that left eye of Emmett's was swollen, and that cut was pretty darn big. I don't think the doc ever looked at it, which was a little bit surprising. That was a pretty bad cut, and I think I should have checked his eye anyway. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but yeah, his eye got messed up by Cater. Now, to Emmett's credit, his power punches did have some effect. He had some nice body work that he went to in this fight. And I think that kind of slowed Cater down a little bit. But Cater he was a little bit frozen by the power coming back. I'm very mindful of it. And I think he just was a little bit too diminished with his offensive output. I mean, I think there was big stretches of the third round where he did nothing but jab. I mean, nothing but jab. Like, didn't build off of it, didn't use it to set anything else up. Just a lot of jabs. And I like the jab. It's a great weapon. And he uses it pretty darn well. But you've got to build off of it, or someone who's pushing more of the action and landing some power punches. Again, the third round universally went to Emmett, and deservedly so. But that's kind of the story of how some of the other rounds might have gone the other way, ultimately. Apart from that fourth round to Emmett, that makes no sense to me. Just straight up none. Was a good fight. Featured some good adjustments from both guys. Said I don't hate a scorecard. I don't hate 3-2 for Emmett. If you gave him the first three, I think you can do that. I don't agree, but I think it's something that can be done under the rule set, under the scoring criteria. Not a lot of kicks from either guy. Again, I think Kattar's just slightly more muted offense in terms of volume, and he did a lot of just straight head hunting. Did not vary his attack all that much, which hurt. It was a little bit odd because Kattar actually does throw some. He's a pretty good leg kicker. Throws a lot of calf kicks. He uses them, then he starts building his jab kind of off of that, and then he builds the rest of his strikes up from there. I don't know if he was worried about being caught on one leg kicking because of the power. I don't know if he was worried about being taken down. It's one of the reasons you throw the calf kick instead of the thigh kick. It's a little bit harder to time the takedown off of it, or certainly to catch it. So I'm not sure entirely what was why he did not throw too many of them, but he did not throw very many at all. I think he threw single digits of leg kicks throughout the course of this fight. And Kattar's left eye was a little bit busted up. It was bruised and swollen. He was bleeding also, I think, from the nose or the bridge of the nose. I mean, Emmett did connect. I don't mean to say that Emmett did nothing but miss punches. He missed a lot. But he had a lot that were blocked. You know, Kattar did a pretty good job of diffusing those bombs. So, I thought Kattar won, but I'm not up in arms over it. Emmett afterwards said he wants a title shot next. He's 37. So I understand him calling for the title shot, and there's a few other moving pieces here that we have to take into consideration. One, we don't know what's going to happen with the third fight between Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. We also, look, if Volkanovski wins, and I do favor him ever so slightly, he might try for a shot at the lightweight belt. He's been pretty vocal about that, actually. And frankly, him and Charles Oliveira, that's a heck of a fight. That is a heck of a fight. We've also got the upcoming fight between Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. We also don't know how badly messed up Emmett's face is after this. I mean, it might just be cuts and bruises, which just takes time to heal. But if there's anything more serious going on in his face, and he's had broken... Dude, remember, Jeremy Stephens broke his face. Did, like, serious damage to him. I think, like, he lost feeling in a quarter of his mouth from some of what Stephens landed on him. Like, that was... He's been busted up in the past, so we'll have to wait and see a little bit how he recovers from this fight. We have to see what Yair and Ortega do. We have to see how Holloway and Volkanovski turns out. I mean, if Max Holloway ekes out a split decision over Volkanovski, let's say it out loud, there might be a fourth fight between those two guys. Might. Would not be, again, there might be. Like, that might be a thing. So, a lot of moving pieces. If you're in Emmett's spot here, you're on a good winning streak. You're maybe the funny thing about Josh Emmett. I think I'm trying to remember the exact statistic here. He has the most knockdowns of anyone outside of the heavyweight division in the last couple of years. In fact, he had scored at least one knockdown in each of his last, I want to say, 8 fights. Did not knock Kattar down here, so he broke the streak, but Emmett might be pound for pound the hardest puncher in the UFC. I mean, you talk about a guy who's able to score knockdowns consistently and has more of them than pretty much anyone who's not a literal heavyweight. His power relative to the guys he's facing is pretty significant. And age of 37, that's old for featherweight. he doesn't have time to mess around. I don't know that he'll get the next title shot. This was a good win. It's a bit of a contested one, and that's gonna hurt his chances a little bit. You've got, and there's just too many unknowns at the moment. He is certainly he certainly should be in consideration for a title shot. Whether or not everything lines up for him, I find it a bit doubtful. I'm not saying it's impossible, but that's a bit unlikely. So, uh, as for Kattar, he's gonna have another tough fight, man. There's no easy fights at featherweight, and Calvin Kattar has been in the freaking trenches, man. Uh, that is a tough fighter. So I don't know. He's gonna fight someone. He's gonna have to fight someone else, probably still in the top 10. He's fought a lot of guys. He hasn't he fought actually? Real quick look at what he's done. I mean, yeah, his last few fights, he's fought other guys in the top. You know, Josh Emmett here, Giga Chikadze before that, Max Holloway, Dan Ige, Jeremy Stevens, Zabit, who we'll talk a little bit about in a bit. Ricardo Lamas, he knocked Ricardo Lamas out, man. That was a gnarly knockout. I mean, his knockout of Jeremy Stevens was brutal. The elbow he crushed him with, man, just. I mean, but you know, to his credit, he took a full year after that fight with Max Holloway, which was probably for the best, man. Holloway put a historic beating on him. No one in the history of the UFC has been beaten, has absorbed as many strikes in one fight as Kattar did against Max Holloway. I mean, you take a beating like that, you take all the time you need to get right. But he did rebound with a really good win over Giga Chikadze. What do the rankings look like? Because he was number 4 coming into this. And Emmett was 7. So he's probably going to wind up fighting. We don't know what's up with the Korean Zombie. You got Arnold Allen in that same space. Bryce Mitchell might need an opponent. If you want to be mean to him, he fights Movsar Evloev. He could fight the loser of Ortega and Rodriguez, maybe. Because I don't think he's not fought either of them. So there's certainly still options for him as far as people he can fight in ways that he can continue to be relevant in the division. But yeah, featherweight's a really, really good weight class. It's probably number 3. Where you rank lightweight or bantamweight as 1 and 2 is largely a matter of preference. It's almost like 1A and 1B. But featherweight's right below them. It's a really solid division, so he's not going to have an easy fight next, kind of no matter who it is. Really good fight. I believe this was your fight of the night. Yes, it was. So, good for them. You know, biggest win of Emmett's career, certainly. So, good fight. Disagreed with the decision, but it's not a robbery by any stretch of the imagination. Co-main event. Kevin Holland defeats Tim Means via Darce choke, 128 of the second. Kevin Holland at welterweight is a bit of a handful. He's not just tall, he's long. He fights long, he's got good timing on his punches. He's got good pop. He hurt Means here, and Means is a pretty durable guy. He hurt Means a couple of different times. A really nice right hand that led to Means trying a single leg. Holland sprawls, defends, realizes he has the Darce opportunity, gets it. Means kind of rolls the wrong way. Well, wrong way is a bit of an overstatement there. Because there's pros and cons to rolling either direction. The way he wound up not working out. Holland locked it up. Means tapped fairly quickly. Again, he was hurt and he was caught in a choke. Holland at welterweight is someone you better have on your radar. He seems to be finding himself. Can fight at a good clip. Is making the necessary adjustments to his preparation and fighting philosophy. Fights long. Has good power. That guy could be a real problem. For a guy who came into the UFC because he had a personality, and not saying he couldn't fight, but that's what got him. If you'll remember the story, he lost a fight on Dana White's Contender Series. but he spent the entire time being held down and talking, or even when they're on the feet talking. And he left an impression on Dana White. He didn't win the fight, but he talked a lot. Well, when the opponent for Thiago Santos fell out, and I forget who it was, they were trying to find a replacement to keep Santos on the card, and Dana White said, "How about we call Big Mouth?" Referencing Kevin Holland. And Holland accepted. He fought Thiago Santos at middleweight on short notice, and he lost, and he handily, but he was tough, and he fought the whole time, and it was enough to kind of keep him around the promotion. Uh, it's been kind of a knock on him for a while that he can be out-wrestled, and he didn't seem to have the right philosophy when he was on his back. The fight before this, I think it was. Either right before this one or the one before that. I think it was the Vettori fight. Okay, so yeah, it was Vettori. Vettori out-wrestled him. I think Brunson did this too. I forget which one in particular. Vettori was the main event, right? Was it the Apex? I'm going to assume it was the Vettori fight, but I might be mistaken. He spent like the entire time being held down, like looking over at Khabib, who was cage side, and saying, "Hey, talk me through this position." He seemed to lean heavier on his personality in some respects and elements of his fighting skills. Now he seems to really be leaning into a bit more understanding the positions, understanding what he needs to do, understanding that if you're on there needs to be some urgency about what he does. And if he's really kind of figured all that stuff out, has he lost? Hang on, I got to double check because he's bounced between middleweight and welterweight a little bit. He returned to welterweight earlier this year, stopped Alex Oliveira. Here stops Means. But let me double check his record here. His first loss was in 2015 at a catchweight. His second, he fought Rafael Lovato Jr. actually. Lost, that was at middleweight. Okay, his only loss at welterweight. He only has one. He lost to Curtis Millender in 2017. That's fairly impressive. I mean, he's fought some tough guys. If you look throughout, he's been at the UFC for a while actually, since 18, but he's had a lot of fights. Fights he had for the UFC actually. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 15. Sheesh. He's had 15 fights in 4 years. Because he fought 4 times in 18. He fought 3 times in 19. He fought 5 times in 2020. He fought 3 times in 2021. He's fought twice in 2022. Yeah, he's a busy guy. He's a busy guy. If he's really kind of found himself, that guy's a problem. That's a real problem. Middleweight. Joaquin Buckley defeated Albert Duraev via doctor stoppage between rounds 2 and 3. This was Buckley's... Put it like this. He's had some other knockouts that were a bit more flashy and impressive. I mean, the one of Impa Kasanganay lives forever, and deservedly so. It's one of the best knockouts you'll ever see. This was Joaquin Buckley's best performance. He fought smart. He was mobile. His gas tank held up the entire fight. That's been a problem for him in the past. And he stopped a very dangerous opponent. Albert Duraev is someone that I'm fairly high on. And Buckley stopped him from getting takedowns and busted him up. They stopped this fight between rounds because Duraev's left eye was swollen completely shut. It started swelling in the second, a little bit in the first, but really in the second, and Buckley just kept hammering it with rights. Buckley survived a pretty nasty head kick, actually, in the first. He won the first round. Yeah. Buckley looked really good here, and really good in every facet of the game. Good shot selection, pretty good cage craft. stopped everything that Duraev wanted to do, completely defused Duraev, essentially neutered him in some very real ways. And Duraev's a guy I have a lot of, who I'm fairly high on. In fact, I picked him to win here, and Buckley came into this fight ready for everything. Great win for Joaquin Buckley here. Duraev, I hope, if you haven't seen a picture of him, and look up his eye when they stop this thing, shut completely. So I hope he's able to get that fixed. I assume something's broken in there. I don't know that it is, but that would be my loose assumption because, boy, was that thing messed up. A great win for Buckley. Let's see. Damir Ismagulov defeats Guram Kutateladze via split decision. It was a 29-28 each way, and then a 30-27 for Ismagulov, and I do not agree with that 30-27 at all. Yeah, there were some interesting gaffes on the on a few different parts here. With the Buckley and Duraev fight again, it was stopped between rounds 2 and 3. The ring announcer who was why am I blanking on his name? It wasn't Bruce Buffer. It was I like the guy. He's really good at his job, and for some reason I am completely blanking. Joe Martinez. He announced that as having been decided at 10 seconds of the third rather than at 5 minutes of the second. There was a tabulation error with the scorecards when they initially read them out for this fight between Ismagulov and Kutateladze. They initially announced it as 28-28, 29-28 for Ismagulov, and 30-27 for Ismagulov, which was utterly baffling. There's no reason for there to be a 10-8 round in this fight. Absolutely none whatsoever. And the 30-27 I think is crap. I don't know how you give Kutateladze the second. Sorry, I don't know how you give Ismagulov the second. That seems very, very odd. I mean, I don't know what that particular judge was looking at, just to be candid. Find his name if this will load. But the action here was pretty darn good. Kutateladze's he's a very good striker. He landed some nice body kicks. He was a bit more varied in his offense. Ismagulov used his jab very nicely. He busted up Kutateladze's face. He started building on it a little bit. There was some good clinch fighting between these two guys. This was a really good fight. In fact, apart from your main event, this would have been fight of the night, I think. Yeah, so the other two judges were Chris Lee and Doug Crosby. Lee for Ismagulov, Crosby for Kutateladze. And then you had Jason Staffen, who went 30-27 for Ismagulov, and I do not know this judge at all. I don't think I've ever heard his name read out before. Most of the media gave it to Kutateladze. I don't disagree with that. I think the only rounds that that are kind of that should be a bit. What's our swing round here? Well, if we look at Lee and Crosby, Crosby gave Kutateladze 1 and 3. Lee gave Ismagulov 2 and 3. So 3 seems to be kind of the swing round here. The second round? Hang on, because I said the second round. I might have meant the first. I don't know. I've been having some computer issues, so I can't stand by a whole lot of what I've been doing. What I did for this card as far as scoring goes. So, hopefully that'll be resolved soon. But point being, I think the 30-27, no, that's a bad scorecard. If you gave it to Kutateladze, I don't think that's wrong. I think 29-28 either way is an acceptable scorecard. But this was a really solid performance from Kutateladze, even in defeat. Kept a good pace, good offensive variety. Just struggled a little bit with the jab, and I don't think he quite had. He stopped some takedowns from Ismagulov, which were really nice. But I was a little bit the other kind of quasi point of controversy here is in the third round. There's a bit of a takedown from Kudrdaladze, and Ismagulov is looking to. He's on a hip. He's looking to kind of hit a technical get up, and Kudrdaladze knees him, and it mostly hits the chest, but there's definitely part of that strike that hits the jaw. Now, I'm not sure of the specifics as far as the rulings here. I don't know if you can't hit the head at all. I don't know if there's some... Because you can kick or knee the body of a downed opponent, but you can't do that to the head. So I don't know about the specifics of it. Looking at the replay, it's understandable why the referee made the call that he did. Just put it like that. Commentary was fairly emphatic that it was the chest, and again, most of it does land to the chest, to be very, very clear. But the referee, because we're in Texas, so there's no replay, so the referee, in this case it was Herb Dean, had to make a split-second call, and again, looking at the replay from his angle, which you can kind of get, you can see how he arrived at the decision that he did. I think if he doesn't, then they restart them on the feet because that's what you would do if there was a foul. I think if the referee rules that that was a legal knee, which you very easily could, in fact, I think most people do believe it was legal, and he rides out, because we were near the end of the round, but we were, I want to say like 30-ish seconds left. Something around that. If Kudrdaladze is able to ride that out on top, I think he wins this fight. I mean, what kind of swung my opinion of the third is after the reset, Ismagulov drops a bomb of a right hand on him. So this was a good fight. These are both very, very talented fighters. Both of them are only gonna move up in the world. I have nothing but fairly high expectations for both of these gentlemen going forward. So this was a good fight. All right, middleweight. Oh, this was nuts. Gregory Rodriguez defeats Julian Marquez via knockout punches, 3:18 of the first. This was every bit the just wild slugfest you'd expect. Rodriguez has really good power, and he's got really good shot selection. Every time he hurt Marquez, Marquez would throw back because Marquez is a dog. But if you watch carefully, whenever Marquez would start throwing, Rodriguez is very cognizant of that, and his defense is still very present. He's still deflecting punches and landing his counters. Really nice stuff from Rodriguez has had some losses in the UFC. He had that split decision with Armen Petrosyan. That was a tough fight. I actually scored that for him, I seem to recall. He's won the others. But he's a really tough guy. If you weren't familiar with him before, this should have been a pretty big wake-up call for you. Sucks for Marquez, but he'll be back. Marquez turns in fan-friendly fights every time he's out there. He dragged a watchable fight out of Sam Alvey, which takes a Herculean effort. So this was a wild little slugfest. So hats off to both these guys. But really good stuff from Rodriguez. And kicking off the main card, Adrian Yanez defeats Tony Kelly via TKO, 3:49 of the first. Yanez beat the crap out of Kelly. Not to say Kelly didn't have moments. He did. He landed a few punches. Had some pretty good clinch work, actually. But Adrian Yanez has a really sharp jab. He has really good shot selection, and he's a very, very accurate puncher. Watch the last little bit of this fight. Kelly's got his guard up and is kind of moving, and Yanez is able to constantly find an angle and drop his punches in the holes in his defense. Yanez is legit. He said after the fight he wants to fight either Nate Maness or Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley's got a fight with Pedro Munoz coming up, but if O'Malley wins that, you could do Yanez and O'Malley. Adrian Yanez is very good. Pay attention to this guy. He's 5-0 now in the UFC. He got a bonus for this. We'll talk about the bonuses in a second. He has bonused in every one of his first 5 UFC fights. Uh, that's a very, very good fighter in a very, very good division. He's not doing this to bums. He's beaten in the UFC thus far. Victor Rodriguez, who I don't think is with the promotion anymore. Sorry, that was his debut. He beat Gustavo Lopez, who's he's fought to a he's fought to a draw with Alatong Hele. He was a little bit lucky to get that. I mean, the point deduction to Alatong was certainly warranted, but he beat Anthony Burchak. Like Lopez is a tough guy. He stopped Randy Costa, and Randy Costa he's been very up and down in the UFC, but Randy Costa's a he's a tough fight. That split decision with Davy Grant probably shouldn't have been split. But Davy Grant's as tough as they come, man. You know, Grant will. You fight Davy Grant, you better bring a lunch. And here he stopped Tony Kelly, who I know people don't like, and I'm not saying there's no reason for disliking the guy. But Kelly had won 2 of his 3 UFC fights coming into this, and he stopped Randy Costa with elbows. He had a tough fight with Kai Kamaka III. Like, he's beating tough guys. It's time to get him a step up in class and probably a new fight deal. Pay that man. Pay that man. Adrian Yanez is legit. So that was our main card. As for the rest of it, Natalia Silva defeated Jasmine Jasdavicius via unanimous decision. 2 30-26s and a 30-27. Not quite sure I get the 30-26, but no issues with Silva winning. There were times, man, here's why I don't agree with the 10-8s. If we're under the old scoring criteria, you have to nearly get a stoppage to warrant a 10-8, and I don't think she was ever that close. But under the new criteria, yeah, you could argue, especially the first. And Silva just really, really good about pot-shotting Jasdavicius at range and kind of tuned her up. Like, Silva looked really good. Welterweight, Jeremiah Wells knocked out Court McGee with a punch, 134 of the first. Sucks to see Court McGee go down, but really nice punch from Wells to finish it. Wells is someone we should be paying attention to. He's got skills. He's got heavy hands. His punching technique could use some refinement. He's a little bit elbows flared and kind of swingy, but he's got power. He can fight on the ground. He's a tough guy. You know, he dealt with a hail of offense from Blood Diamond. Kind of shut him down, wore him out, and then finished him. So Wells is someone that we might want to be taking a pretty good look at. Featherweight, Ricardo Ramos defeats Danny Chavez via spinning back elbow knockout, 112 of the first. Ramos was throwing all kinds of spinning techniques, and Chavez was avoiding most of them. Landed a few good calf kicks, and then Ramos just got him back towards the fence, jabbed the body, and Chavez was kind of circling away, expecting an overhand right. Instead, Ramos has him measured, and spinning back elbow knocked him out on his feet. Like, boom, switch goes off. He's kind of leaning against the fence, and a couple of more punches before he falls. But beautiful, brutal knockout by Ricardo Ramos. That'll be one of your knockout of the year contenders. I'm fairly certain of it. Lovely, lovely finish. Maria Oliveira and Gloria DePaula fought to a split decision. There were 29-28s, 2 for Oliveira, 1 for DePaula. I scored it for DePaula, but this was all right. I don't remember too much about it. It wasn't a great fight, but it was certainly acceptable. Bantamweights, Cody Stamann defeats Eddie Wineland via TKO punches, 59 seconds of the first round. Stamann came out like a bat out of hell. Landed a pretty solid 1-2 that kind of took Wineland's balance, and he just never let him recover. He battered him back to the fence, unloaded. A little bit late on the stoppage, maybe even arguably from the ref. Stamann needed this win. He was on a pretty good losing streak. I want to say 4. It was 3 or 4. He needed this in a big way, and afterwards seemed to indicate that he's finally kind of finding his footing and is now starting to really fight at what he feels is closer to his potential. He looked good here. This was a really good win. As for Eddie Wineland, he retired after the fight. Understandable. I mean, Wineland. They always reference that he's a former WEC bantamweight champion, which he is. He was the first, for the record, WEC bantamweight champion. He lost it in his first title defense against Chase Beebe, but I mean, he debuted professionally in April of 2003. So think about that. He's been fighting professionally, to say nothing of all the training, anything he might have done before that, for over 19 years. He debuted in April of '03. I mean, is it any wonder he is ready to pack it in? He's had 41 fights over, again, 19 years. Uh, he's he's 1-5 in his last six. Like, it's probably time. Uh, I wish him all the best in whatever he chooses to do next. You know, Wineland. I mean, I have some fond memories of him and the fights that he's produced. So, best of luck to you, sir, in whatever you do next. Middleweight. Oh, this was rough. Phil Haas defeats Duran Win via TKO elbows, 4:25 of the second. I gave Haas a 10-8 in the first. I think most reasonable people did. Win just had nothing. Absolutely nothing for Haas in this fight. I mean, it was just a brutal, brutal beatdown. Haas kept him on the end of a jab, landed power punches. Anytime Win was able to get close, he started landing elbows. I mean, his corner should probably not have let Win come out for the second round. That's how bad the first round was. This really probably should have been stopped minutes before it was. Like, this was just. I mean, I don't. This is going to sound insulting to Duran Win, and I'm not trying to be insulting to him. This is about how good Haas looked. I imagine that's how he would look if he was fighting, me. I would not have lasted a 1/8 as long as Duran Win did. Okay, if Phil Haas hits me like the first four punches that he lands on Win, I'm unconscious almost certainly. Right? Like, I'm not that tough. When I say this is kind of what Haas might look like if he were fighting me, I mean that to say he looked so good and so dialed in that he turned a very tough, very good fighter into looking like someone who barely knows what they're doing. That's how good Phil Haas looked here. This was a marvelous performance from Phil Haas. Oh, and I hate to say it, but the only judge to actually give Phil Haas a 10-8 in that first round was Sal D'Amato. How is it that he's the only one that saw that one clearly? Yeah, to the other two guys, I don't know what. Again, even under the old criteria, which was what I was trying to use when I was scoring fights, when I was scoring these ones, that's a 10-8 round. Even under the old rules, that's 10-8. That was just a brutal beatdown. Just brutal. And kicking everything off, Roman Dolidze defeats Kyle Dawkins via knockout, knee and punches, 113 of the first. Really nice finish from Roman Dolidze here. I think he hurt Dawkins with something. I forget what it was. He gets a takedown. Dawkins wall walks. I think it was just a right hand, just a punch. Dolidze slips around to his back in the clinch and catches him when he's not expecting it with a knee to the head. And you can knee the head from that position, but it's hard to get a lot of oomph on it. It's harder for big guys to do it, especially from the posture that both men had here. And you don't see them end fights all that often, but he hit him with a knee pretty much to the eye. Nasty knee, good win for Dolidze. Yeah, solid finish. Solid finish. So this event tied for most knockouts or TKO stoppages in a single event. There were 8 of them. There's 6 other events that have had 8 in UFC history. It was a violent night, guys. It's a violent night. So your fight of the night I mentioned was Cater and Emmett. As for your bonuses, as for your performances rather than fight, the following individuals got $50,000 checks: Kevin Holland, Joaquin Buckley, Gregory Rodriguez, Adrian Yanez, Jeremiah Wells, Ricardo Ramos, Cody Stamen, Phil Haas, and Roman Dolidze. Those of you keeping track of home, that means everyone who got a finish got a $50,000 check. Here's what kills me about this. This will be lauded as generosity on the UFC's part. And I'm not saying it's not generous. I am saying the UFC has done this more than once. They could absolutely afford to do this for every card. The UFC makes over $1 billion a year now. They're some of the most recent filings and people who have crunched the numbers on that kind of stuff. And if you want some of my, at least one of my sources, one of the things I research when I do this, because I'm kind of a polemic about this. I can't get detailed into all of these things. I don't have the time, I don't have the expertise, so I have a handful of experts, people who I know what they're talking about. I consult them and I relate to you, and that's kind of what a polemic is. But Josh Nash, who is Hey Not the Face on Twitter, he digs through this stuff. He's the one who's done a lot of coverage on the lawsuit that's still ongoing against the UFC. The UFC at this point makes $1 billion a year. They could absolutely afford to do this for every card. They won't, because they would be... Bear in mind, when I say they could afford to do this, I don't mean they could do this and, keep scraping by. I mean, they would still be massively profitable, just not as massively profitable. And given the state of Endeavor, the owner of the UFC, it's not surprising that they're kind of being as penny pinching as they can. But one of the ways you keep the troops in line with stuff like this is random displays of generosity like this. This is a weird thing about human psychology. This isn't only true of humans, actually, believe it or not. This is true of animals too. If you want to reinforce behavior, random reinforcement is actually more impactful than consistent reinforcement. Right? You want to get a dog to perform a trick. You don't necessarily reward it I mean, you do when you're like teaching the dog the mechanics. Okay, how do you sit? This is how you sit. You sat. Good job. Here, have a treat. Now sit. But after they understand the base mechanics of it, random reinforcement is better at keeping the behavior imprinted than regular reinforcement. And look, this is true of people as well. Again, I'm not entirely sure why it is, but if you want to help keep someone doing something, you randomly reinforce them positively for the behavior that you want, rather than necessarily every time. So you look at so point being, if the UFC wants to keep its fighters from making a tremendous amount of noise, occasional random bouts of generosity like this will stick in people's heads. There are fighters who are happy to tell stories about generosity from the UFC. I think both Daniel Cormier and Michael Bisping have told stories about how they were at times financially struggling a little bit when they were fighting, and Dana White gifted them money. And I'm not saying that's nothing. And in fact, if you're struggling financially, a $100,000 check from the UFC can make all the difference in the world. What I am saying about this is Dana White has lost more than that at a night of blackjack. He's probably lost more than that on a single hand of blackjack. And that's kind of what you're missing. But all that is to say, I am glad those fighters got paid. I think I've proposed this before. Essentially do away with the show and win bonus scenario. Bump everyone's pay by about 25%. You might change this for, there's certain contexts that this might not be applicable for. There are a bunch of fighters that have flat rates and whatnot. There should still be elements of this that apply to them, but as a general rule, do away with show and win. Bump everyone's pay by you could do it even by a smaller amount, by say, 50-ish%, and then just tell everyone you get there, and there's always a bonus of, again, we could do 50 grand. You get a finish, get a $50,000 check. Uh, that will incentivize the kind of fighting that the UFC wants to incentivize. I mean, the BS notion that you have to keep fighters hungry. By the way, has anyone asked Dana White if he has felt his hunger diminish as he has become incredibly wealthy? Dana, you make, hundreds of million, you're worth, hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you feel that you've lost some of your passion and your drive for what you're doing? And shouldn't you maybe take a pretty decent salary cut so that you're still hungry enough to continue along the way the same way that you think your fighters should be? I mean, of course not. It's ridiculous. Uh, but again, long and the short of it, I'm glad all these fighters got paid. The UFC should, at a bare minimum, be doing this for every event. I think you would quiet a lot of discomfort, you would actually quiet a lot of noise from fighters if you instituted a straight finish bonus for everyone. Just throwing it out there. But if you want my full report, as well as round-by-round live scoring and whatnot, and GIF video clips of the finishes, 411mania.com in the MMA zone, you can find my full report there. All right, moving on. Before I move on, let me talk very briefly about some other stuff from around the week, from the weekend of combat sports. Japanese kickboxing had the match. A kickboxing fight between Tenshin Nasukawa and Takeru. Forget his last name. He only goes by Takeru, I seem to recall. And they went out of their way to stop that fight and every highlight of it from being seen anywhere. This is one of the most profitable events ever, mind you. Everything was expensive. Tickets were this was a what was the gate? Look this up real fast. There's a little bit of a translation issue potentially about this, and we have to convert. And we're converting Japanese yen to U.S. dollars, but somewhere between $15 and $25 million. I mean, they broke a record in terms of number of spectators. They had like over 59,000 people there. It was, like front row seats were 22,000 apiece, I think. U.S. dollars, like 3 million yen. Just a wildly successful event, and the people broadcasting this just really did not want anyone to see it. They have been stingier than a lot of other fights and a lot of other organizations about taking down even like pics of the fight. Certainly any video clips or GIFs. I don't really understand. I don't know. They didn't broadcast this in too many places, actually. Yeah, it was kind of a mess. For as successful as this was, it was a little bit of a mess. As far as the fight itself, it was only 3 rounds, and kickboxing rounds were 3-minute rounds. It was really good for as long as it lasted. Tenshin Nasukawa wins. I believe he retired after the fight, or is considering it. He's undefeated in kickboxing and might have the first meaningful undefeated kickboxing record if he retires in decades in that segment of kickboxing. So if you happen to see that or just want to be made aware of it, if you can find it, I think it's worth looking up. In the world of boxing, I need to talk very briefly about this because if you're not a big boxing fan, let me get you hip to someone who I think you would enjoy, even if you're normally an MMA guy who's not big on boxing. There's a light heavyweight who is Russian by birth, and he fights out of Montreal, Canada, and his name is Artur Beterbiev. he is remarkable. He fought Joe Smith Jr. He fights at light heavyweight in boxing, which is 175, I seem to recall. He is now 18-0 with 18 stoppages. That's a heck of a thing to do in boxing, especially as you increase in competition. There are some guys who might be able to pull that off at the lower levels, but he has been just abusing people. He stopped Joe Smith Jr. in the second round. He dropped him in the first. Joe Smith Jr., by the way, pretty darn tough fighter in his own right, had never been dropped prior to this fight. He got dropped at the end of the first with a nice little right hand from Beterbiev. Caught him on the temple, off-balanced him, dropped him to a knee. Legitimate knockdown in boxing. Second round, Beterbiev just abused him. Dropped him twice in the second. And then the finishing sequence catches Smith with a left uppercut, then a right uppercut, then another couple of punches, and the ref just like, please stop. Please stop. He's already dead. Just rolled right over him. He now has 3 of the 4 major belts at light heavyweight. He was the WBC and the IBF champion coming into this. He now won the WBO. The only one missing is the WBA that Dmitry Bivol has. Let's check Bivol real fast. I believe he's WBA. Bivol is, yeah, he's the WBA Super. He's the WBA Super light heavyweight title champion, which is not a weight class distinction. It means there's a regular champion and a super champion. And let me say it like this. When it comes to fighter pay, which is one of the things I've started to care a lot about recently, when you look at what fighters put themselves through, bringing the Ollie Act to MMA might be the only reasonable way in a short period of time to get fighters more fair compensation. There's pros and there's cons that come along with that, and I think there do need to be some other considerations and one of the things that you dislike about boxing, and a lot of people dislike this, it's not just that there's a lot of sanctioning bodies, there's a bunch. There tend to be the only 4 that really matter: the WBA, the WBO, WBC, and IBF. Those are kind of the big 4. Whenever you hear talk about like undisputed champions in those in boxing in a weight class, they have those 4 belts. Some of them, however, are super titles instead of regular titles, because it's easier to bestow a super title on a champion so that he's not necessarily having to go through the same sets of mandatory challengers and can instead fight other fights or unify titles, and then you have a regular champion who does more of the rank and file work and can earn a shot at the super champion. And you see, people don't really care for that, but Bivol is the WBA super light heavyweight champion. He is the only one of the 4 major belts that Beterbiev does not have. Beterbiev and Bivol would be a darn good fight if they can make it. It would unify all 4 belts at light heavyweight, which might be a first of the 4-belt era. I'd have to double check that, but my hunch says that it is. I mean, Bivol's coming off of one of the highest profile win of his career when he beat Canelo Alvarez. And the judging for that fight was atrocious, by the way. That was 10 rounds to 2 for Bivol, and everyone had it like all the official judges had it was it 8-4? There it's 12 rounds. Yeah, I think that which is, and the way they scored it too, just that was a whole other thing. So I don't think it would draw a whole lot because neither Bivol nor Beterbiev are big draws, but that would be a very, very, very good fight, and I hope they're able to make it. Beterbiev he's a lot of fun to watch, and he is a force. He's an absolute force in the boxing world. I wanted to because I made a point of watching that fight because I wanted to see it. I was curious, and he just I expected him to win. To be clear, did not expect him to just abuse Joe Smith and get him out of there in less than 6 minutes. Like that guy's got some serious punching power. So if you're interested in some other stuff from around the combat sports world, in addition to MMA, there's a few recommendations for you from me. So just so if you can be hip to better be if you're at all curious. All right, moving on. UFC on ESPN 38 this coming Saturday. The UFC is back at the Apex Center. This card is not great on paper, but there are some good fights. Want to make that very, very clear. There are some good fights here. There are some not so good ones too, but main event, not the fight I would have made main event out of this particular card, but what are you going to do? I don't know if they had someone else that they wanted to be in the main event for this one, and they wound up like offering it to some of these fighters on shorter notice for it to be 5 rounds than normal, and that led to other people, some of them not wanting to do 5 rounds on short notice, which I completely understand. But your main event is Arman Tsarukyan and Mateusz Gamrot, which is a very good fight. Let me be clear. When I say this isn't the one I would have made main event, I would have gone with Magnin Rakhmonov, which we'll talk about in a minute. This is a very good fight. Arman Tsarukyan is 18-2. His only loss was his UFC debut. Sorry, his only loss in the UFC was his UFC debut. He fought Islam Makhachev on somewhat short notice, and he wrestled with Makhachev for that full fight. Didn't win, but that was a very good fight. He's won 5 in a row since then. 3 decisions, and the last 2 have been finishes. He missed weight when he fought Matt Frivola. That seems to have been a one-time thing, so hopefully he's got that under control, and it was just one of the random things in the universe. But he stopped both Christos Giagos and Joel Alvarez in his last 2 fights. He's good everywhere. He's a bit of a tank, and Mateusz Gamrot is Polish, a very good grappler. His only loss in the his only loss ever, actually. He dropped a close split decision to Guram Kutateladze in both of their UFC debuts. Since then, he knocked out Scott Holtzman, tapped out Jeremy Stevens, and TKO'd Carlos Diego Ferreira. This is a really good fight. I have no idea what's going to happen. I would feel better favoring Tsarukyan over 3 rounds instead of 5, but Gamrot has fought 5 rounds before. He was the KSW featherweight champion. Yeah, he won he has won he has a couple of featherweight fights. Actually just the one. No, just the one. But he fought at featherweight for 5 rounds to win the vacant KSW featherweight championship. He has fought into the 4th once when his first defense of the not his first. One of his defenses of the KSW lightweight title went 4, and his last defense of it before he signed with the UFC went all 5. So he's got more 5-round experience. Which, did he win that in a 3-round fight? Weird. Sorry. So he's got more 5-round experience, which is a big thing. Both men are good grapplers. Tsarukyan's a better wrestler, but Gamrot's better if we're talking like submission grappling. I imagine Tsarukyan's the heavier puncher. He's a little bit more wild with his punches. I genuinely don't know what to expect out of this fight. Other than that, it's very good. I think over 5 rounds, am I really gonna lean Gamrot? I don't know if he can take what Tsarukyan can. I mean, he's only had the 1 loss. Tsarukyan can dish offense, though. He can put damage on you. So this is a really tough one. I think I am gonna lean Tsarukyan. I don't know. I'm going back and forth as I think about this. My usual, you know what? I'm just going to be prepared to be very wrong about this. I'm going to pick Gamrot. I think the 5-round experience is going to come into play. Soyukian might get him out of there early. That wouldn't shock me, actually, if he does it. Just for the record, would not shock me. But I think this one's more likely to go long. And I think the longer it goes, that experience is something you have to experience. You know, a lot of people have mentioned that about 5-round. You can train for a 5-round fight, but the first time you have to fight it, it's different. And maybe it's different in ways that you can deal with and you can still win. Plenty of people have won 5-round decisions in their first time fighting 5 rounds. That's common. But it is different. So I'm gonna lean Gamrot, but very, very slightly, and great fight. Co-main event, great fight. Neil Magny and Shavkat Rakhmonov. Again, this would have been my choice for main event. Now, as I mentioned, if they came out with the offer of, hey, how about 5-round main event, but you're, not too far out from the event, and you don't have time to adjust your training for it, I understand. Magny won his last couple of fights. I had that tough fight with Max Griffin. That was split. I can't remember how I scored that one, but it was a tough fight. He beat Jeff Neal before that. Was a good win. I mean, he's 5-1 in his last 6. He's only lost to Michael Chiesa. And Chiesa out-grappled him over 5 rounds. Before that, Santiago Ponzinibbio stopped him. I'd put it into the 4th before he stopped him. Whereas Rakhmonov is undefeated. He is 15-0. He is 3-0 in the UFC. And he has finished Has he finished everyone? Good grief. He has finished every one of his fights. I mean, his win over Carlston Harris earlier this year, that really nice wheel kick that dropped him. Neil Magny is a tough kind of gatekeeper fighter at this point. I think we've seen his ceiling, which is very high, by the way. But I think we've seen it. He's here to be a really stiff test for Shavkat Rakhmonov. And this is easily the toughest fight Rakhmonov has had. Neil Magny's a credentialed guy. He's been with the UFC for a long time. He's a lot of wins. He knows how to fight. He knows how to fight in pretty much every area. He knows how to win. So, big step up for Rakhmonov. But I'm a big believer in what Rakhmonov does. I think very, very highly of his abilities. And I think he gets the win here. I won't be shocked if Magny proves a bit too much right now, if Magny finds, avenues to eventually get this one going in his direction. He's long. Both these guys are long. Magny's got that absurd reach. He'll have the reach edge. If Magny can jab, fight long, keep things at distance, mix in clinch work, I'm not saying he can't win, but I think Rakhmonov's really on the come up at welterweight. I think that's someone that people are sleeping on Rakhmonov a little bit. And I've been very impressed with what he's done in the UFC thus far. I think he gets it done here. So I'm picking Rakhmonov, but that's a really good fight. Not so good a fight. Heavyweights. Josh Parisian and Alan Badeau. Parisian has gone 1-2 in the UFC. Only one was a split decision win. Badeau has not yet won in the UFC. I'll pick Parisian, but please just don't let it go long. Lightweight. Thiago Moises and Christos Giagos. This is not a bad fight. Moises is on a bit of a rough streak. Lost his last 2. He got out-wrestled and submitted by Islam Makhachev and then stopped by Joel Alvarez. But he'd won 3 in a row before that with some solid wins. Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, and Alexander Hernandez. Whereas Giagos, he's been with the UFC for a bit, actually. Since 18, he's had several fights. He is 4-3 in the UFC. Lost to Arman Sayuki in his last time out. Won twice before that, beating Sean Soriano and Carlton Minus. I think he went over Damir Hadzovic in there too. I'm going to pick Moises here, but that's not a terrible fight. Bantamweight, I mentioned him a little bit earlier. Nate Maness will take on Umar Nurmagomedov. Maness is 3-0 in the UFC. Wins over Tony Gravely, Luke Sanders, and Johnny Munoz Jr. I'm picking Nurmagomedov here. Umar Nurmagomedov is pretty darn good, to the shock of no one. Let me double check, actually. I'm 90% sure he is who I think he is, but I want to be... would like to be more 100%. Yeah, he's 14-0. Yeah, he is. He is 2-0 in the UFC. Wins over Sergey Morozov and Brian Kelleher. He submitted both of them. Yeah, I'm picking Umar Nurmagomedov. I don't know how Maness is going to handle all the wrestling. And Umar Nurmagomedov is a pretty good striker, too. So, good fight. Bantamweights almost never miss. But I like Nurmagomedov there. Middleweight, Chris Curtis and Rodolfo Vieja. This is an interesting one. Vieja's looking pretty good. He had the loss to Anthony Hernandez. He rebounded by beating Dustin Stoltzfus. I mean, Vieira's one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners of his generation. Like, he's a remarkable jiu-jitsu guy. He's been working on his overall MMA game. Chris Curtis is just this is the action man. He's got power. Had a bit of an improbable rise through the UFC with his 2 wins. I don't think he was favored to win either of them, but he did. His win over Phil Hawes came a little bit out of nowhere. Hawes was kind of doing a number on him before Curtis landed a couple of good counters and turned the tide and then stopped him. That wasn't his most recent fight. Who was it before that? He beat Brendan Allen. I was a little bit surprised about that one too, because I think fairly highly of Brendan Allen, but yeah, he stopped Allen in the first round. I'm actually going to pick Curtis here, believe it or not. Look, if this hits the mat, it's entirely possible, if not probable, that Vieira can drown Curtis in his jiu-jitsu game, but I think Curtis is getting a little bit slept on. I am going to pick Curtis here. That's your main card. As for the prelims, light heavyweights, Carlos Ulberg and Tafan Chukwi. Oy. Ulberg, I guess. I think Ulberg can stick and move and fight long, and Chukwi struggles with that. But not looking forward to that one. Featherweight, Shaileon Nurdanbeke and TJ Brown. See. Nurdanbeke. He is 36-10. He's fought in the UFC. Twice, actually. Lost to Josh Kulabau and then beat Sean Soriano. Whereas Brown, I'm sure this guy is who I think he is. He is 16-8. He is not who I thought he was. I recognize now that I see his picture, but not who I thought he was. Brown's gone 2-2 in the UFC. He lost 2 in a row to Jordan Griffin and then Danny Chavez, but has rebounded pretty nicely. Wins over Kai Kamaka and Charles Rosa. I think I'm going to go Brown, but that's a lean. Bantamweights, Harlian Paiva, and Sergey Morozov. Morozov's had a rough run in the UFC. He fought Umar Nurmagomedov, I think both of their debuts. Gave Nurmagomedov a heck of a fight before succumbing to submission in the second round. Beat Khalid Taha to bounce back, and then his fight with Douglas Silva de Andrade from February is one of the wildest fights you'll ever see. Just insane swings of momentum. He hurts Silva de Andrade. He gets his back. He nearly chokes him. He gets hurt. Wild fight. Morozov is so much better than his UFC record indicates. The same is somewhat true of Harlian Paiva, who is 3-3 in the UFC. Losses to Kai Kara France, Rogerio Bontorin, and most recently Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley whooped him, man. I mean, he's looked better since moving back to bantamweight. The Kyler Phillips win was pretty solid. I think I'm going to lean towards Morozov here, but he needs to kind of sort himself out. If he loses again here, that is not a ringing. Like, he's got a world of potential, but you've got to start actualizing that. Right? You got to bring it to bear in a sustained way, rather than just have people like me say, "Boy, he's pretty darn good on paper, but he's got to put it together." Flyweight JP Bays and Cody Durden. Huh. Durden 1-2-1 in the UFC. Only win is over Oichi Long. Bays is what, 1-2? He's 9-4 overall. 0-2. Huh. A good fight with Montel Jackson, though. I mean, he lost it, but that was a good fight. Probably go with Bays here, but he's on some thin ice. Bantamweight Brian Kelleher and Mario Bautista. Kelleher coming off of a loss to Umar Nurmagomedov. Let's see, whereas Bautista, he is 3-2 in the UFC. Coming off a win. I'm gonna lean toward. I think I'm gonna lean towards Kelleher, but that'll probably be a good fight. We also have Vanessa Demopoulos and Jinyu Fry. Probably going with Fry here. Demopoulos has some really solid grappling. Really solid grappling. But if she can't bring it to bear, she struggles a bit. And Fry is is kind of a physical tank. So I'm going to lean towards Fry there just a little bit. Did we lose that fight? Okay, somewhat. There's a little bit of controversy around this one, so I'm going to list it, but I'm not sure. It does not have a bout order, and some places listed as having fallen through. But there's a flyweight fight potentially between Tyson Nam and Tiger Ulanbekov. Let me check the UFC real fast because this site listed as having fallen through due to an Ulanbekov injury. Actually, check the UFC here. Cater versus Emmett is not live now. I think the UFC updated their page. Well, I assume that'll be up tomorrow. Alright, I'm going to leave that alone for the moment then. And just say that if the fight happens, I will favor Ulanbekov. He had that loss to Tim Elliott in his last fight, but his 2 wins before that were pretty good. And Nam's a good fighter, but he has really struggled to find consistency. I mean, in his current run in the UFC, lost to Sergio Pettis, lost to Kai Kara France, okay, like good fighters. Beat Zarek Adeshev, beat Jerome Rivera, and then lost to Matt Schnell. And Matt Schnell's another good fighter, but he's got to really kind of even that out. So I'm going to lean towards Ulanbekov, assuming the fight happens. So I will have coverage of that event Saturday in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. So if you are so inclined, please do stop by and say hello. I always appreciate it. All right, moving on to news such as it is. The UFC is working on a bantamweight title fight. Aljamain Sterling going for his second defense. When he takes on TJ Dillashaw, they're trying to have this set for UFC 279. Not necessarily. I think I might have gone with Aldo personally, Aldo and Sterling, but I don't think this is egregious. This is not like terrible matchmaking. It's not necessarily what I would have done. Look, Dillashaw never was beaten for his title. Lost it because of his drug use. Served a suspension, came back. I thought he lost that Sandhagen fight, though, just for the record. I think especially in light of scoring under the new criteria, I think they really fumbled that one. He's just coming off of the. Let me just put it like this. I don't object to him getting the title shot, but his only win, assuming it happens at UFC 279, let me pull him up real fast. Because 279 is currently scheduled to take place September 10th. We don't have a date or a venue yet, but this is kind of what they're aiming for. This hasn't been announced, so again, in the works, not signed at the moment. But again, September 10th, and TJ's last, because he had to, his knee got torn up when he fought Sandhagen, so he had to have that surgically repaired. So he will have one win, a controversial split decision, in over 3 years. And I mean, it's not like old Aljamain Sterling's. I don't object to him getting the win over Jan. I think if you were to apply the same lot, here's one of the things that kills me about the scoring criteria. It's not that I think it's bad, I have issues with it, but I think if you apply the same logic to Jan Sterling 2 that you did to Shevchenko and Santos, Jan should have won that fight. I scored it for Jan, in full disclosure. That said, I don't object to Sterling win in some kind of like, it was a robbery, it wasn't a robbery. In fact, it was probably the more accurate reflection of what happened, but the scoring criteria doesn't always accurately reflect what happened. It reflects the scoring criteria. So, again, not necessarily the direction I would have gone, but it's a fine fight. Assuming it gets made, so we'll wait and see on that. But you're going to have a couple of people. I don't know who the crowd's going to be with on that one. Because Sterling's not exactly a fan favorite, and neither's Dillashaw at this point. So, we'll wait and see. Let's see, other bits of news. Zabit Magomedsharipov announced he is retiring from mixed martial arts. He is pursuing a career as a doctor. I think he said one of the things that led to this decision was he lost the desire to hurt people. And you know, fair play to him. If that's gone from you, if you have lost the desire to inflict damage on another human being, do not fight for a living. Like that's a bit of damage to your. Bear in mind, when I say damage, I do kind of mean that. I've said this before. Doing violence to another human being is itself a traumatic event. Like you're not. We're not really meant to hurt each other. You know, either physically or psychologically. So people who do that for a living, yeah, there's something different about them. We all know this. You know, the people who fight for a living, you are doing damage to another human being and you are taking damage, and that it messes with you. You know, there's a reason that there's a lot of people go to any gym and you can find people who in that gym will, in the course of sparring or whatnot, be that light or hard, will hang or beat professional fighters. Like they'll get the better of them. And then, well, why don't you fight? I'm no. When you get out there and you have to really hurt somebody, it's different. There are people who are successful fighters who are not the best technically, but who are very in tune with the part of them that lets them hurt another human being. And that part of your psychology and your makeup amounts for a lot when you have to do it. You know, I don't think I would ever have. I don't think I have what it takes to be a professional fighter. I train because I enjoy it. Kind of the long and the short of that. And I've done sparring, but I genuinely don't know what what it's like to have to hurt someone, especially just like for your job. Like my job requires me to give you brain damage. I don't know. You have to be okay with that. You have to go into that cage. You know, Tim Bradley, former world champion boxer, now he's one of the commentators for I think ESPN. I forget which broadcast service, but one of them, and he's not bad at it. But he's told the story many times. Every time before he went out to fight, he and his wife would have a conversation, and he would say, I might not be the same person when I come back. Like, psychologically, I might be different. That's legit. That's real. You run that risk. And if you're not okay with that, I've said this before, like, you could kill someone in there. People do. Just a couple of weeks ago, some South African boxer died. I mean, the clip of what happened to him made the rounds because it was, if you don't know what you're looking at, it's funny. Like, he kind of off balance, he gets cracked, and at the same time he hits the other guy, and he off balances the other guy, and the ref kind of resets them. And the guy who wound up dying, like, turned and started walking towards the corner where there's no one and throwing punches. Like, something's very clearly wrong here, and he passed a few days later. You could do that to, like, the guy who he was fighting, who did nothing wrong, nothing illegal, nothing outside the laws of the rules of fighting, of the boxing match, nothing like that, but he killed a man. And he's talked a little bit about it. People have been sending him just terrible things. Like, that changes you. And you have to be okay. If you accept that I'm going to sign on the dotted line and I'm going to go fight, I might die, I might kill someone. That's reality. And you have to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with hurting someone, then be done. And that's not a moral judgment. That doesn't make him any less. But if he has lost that, then yeah, he should be done. And you know what? God bless him. I hope he makes a fine doctor. He might go down as one of the bigger what-ifs that have come out of the UFC because he captured a lot of people's imagination, you know? But I wish him all the best. If he's in training for some kind of medical, make the world a better place, man. Seriously. Last bit of news that I have here. This also pertains to upcoming match. The UFC is looking at having Jose Aldo versus Merab Dvalishvili to take place at UFC 278. This would be the card in Salt Lake City that is headlined by Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards. That's a heck of a fight. I am a little bit torn about this. Aldo's good about stopping takedowns. He's good about inflicting damage. But Merab has the most relentless motor I think I've ever seen. That guy just never stops. I get tired watching him fight. Like, that's the pace he keeps. And he does it with, like, hard, labor-intensive stuff. He will wrestle you for 15 minutes. And I think Eddie Alvarez said it one time, like, you can't wrestle for 15 minutes. You can wrestle for about 10. Because wrestling is so physically taxing. And no, Merab Dvalishvili will wrestle for 15 minutes. He has an absolutely insane motor. My initial thought is leaning towards Aldo because Dvalishvili gets hit. Well, he's got a good chin. He's also fighting a guy who is really good about closing the show. But if they make it, that's a perfectly fine fight to add to a pay-per-view. So hopefully we'll see if that gets confirmed or whatnot. But that's in the works. All right. That is everything I've written down for news. Let me check Twitter one last time, and if there's nothing new breaking, we will get out of here. All right, nope, nothing new. So, plugs. I've got a fair amount of podcasting to do this week, believe it or not. Monday, there will be a triple feature. 2 straight-to-streaming movies, and one that we should have done otherwise, but put off until it came out on digital purchase. So myself and Mark Radulich. Is there anyone else on that one, actually? Double check. I don't think there is. Yeah, that's just me and Mark. We will be talking about the triple feature of Spiderhead, which has been on the docket since it was originally supposed to be released quite a while ago. The Father of the Bride remake, starring Andy Garcia and Gloria Estefan. Those are on Netflix and HBO Max, respectively. And the movie that everyone talked about and got a pretty big theatrical release, believe it or not, that should have been on our schedule for Damn You Hollywood, but didn't quite make it on because it kind of bounced around a little bit, and we weren't quite sure what was going on with it, so it just kind of got pushed back. But Everything Everywhere All at Once. I liked one of these. And I'll let you guess which one, but we will talk about all three. I imagine the bulk of our conversation will be devoted to Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's not much to say about the other two. But that will be Monday. Tuesday will be a Damn You Hollywood double shot for first the Chip and Dale movie that is on Disney Plus. Yeah, Disney Plus. And the Pixar feature Lightyear, which had a pretty disappointing opening, all things considered. Was a good bit below what Disney wanted out of it, so we will be reviewing those two films. That will be myself, Mark Radulich, Alexis Haina, and David Wright. Sorry, screwed up the last names there. So we will talk animation because Chip and Dale has a fair bit of that goes on to it, and we will talk Lightyear and all the stuff that goes along with that. So that's my podcasting for the week. As for my other stuff, before recording this show, I got it out later than usual because I had to finish covering Impact Wrestling Slammiversary. This was their 20 years. Man, I watched TNA. I wasn't a day one guy. I will not pretend to be that. I started watching around the time Christian moved from the WWE to TNA and started going by Christian Cage. I was aware of them before that, but when I started kind of, who didn't go out of their way to find that first triple threat match between Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, and Christopher Daniels? I was really kind of kind of a hardcore fan at that point, so everyone heard about that match, and you looked that up because that was amazing. Still love that match. I covered their 20th anniversary show. Never thought, for as many times that company has been on the brink of just total collapse. 20 years, man, they're still going. They are still going, so good for them. So my full report for that is in the Wrestling Zone of 411mania.com. Other professional wrestling related coverage, I cover AEW's Dark Elevation on Monday, MLW stuff on Thursday, WWE SmackDown on Friday, and Saturday UFC, of course, UFC and ESPN Plus, UFC and ESPN 37, not on ESPN Plus. I mean, I'll watch on ESPN Plus, but it's also on ESPN. So that's what's on the agenda for the week. And next Sunday, we will be back here recording to review UFC on ESPN. Sorry, 38. Reviewing UFC on ESPN 38 and previewing UFC 276, Cannonier versus Adesanya. Also on that card, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. So, be previewing the big, what used to be International Fight Week. This takes place on the 2nd of July, one of my brother's birthdays. So, we'll have a full preview of that for you next week. That's a pretty solid card, actually, looking at it. That's not saying everything's great, but that's solid. I mean, those top two fights are great. You're getting two title fights. You're getting a third fight between two guys who operate at the very bleeding edge of of MMA sophistication. You got Sean Strickland and Alex Pereira. That could be wild. Pedro Munoz and Sean O'Malley, Robbie Lawler, Brian Barberena. There's some good stuff on that card. So, full preview next week. Until then, I'm out of here. It's actually really late. So, I'm done. Thank you all very, very much for listening. I deeply appreciate you all as always. Until next time, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.